Hello everyone, and welcome back to Game Easy, Roll Good. Today we are continuing our series here for the subclass changes for martial characters in the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook for 2024. But before I get started on that, I just want to real quick say if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, but you keep coming back and watching these videos, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps me out quite a bit. But yes, again, we are starting with the monk subclass here. We're going to give them an open hand. So let's take a quick look at the preview of what the subclasses are for the monk. So a real quick note here is that the naming convention has changed for the monk subclasses, whereas before in 2014 or pre-2024, it was the way of the such and such monk. That has changed to the warrior of the such and such monk. So for example, we have warrior of mercy, which was previously the way of mercy monk, and then warrior of shadow, warrior of the elements, which is sort of a new-ish class. We'll get to that when we get to the actual subclass changes. And then finally is the warrior of the open hand. So again, every class that is published in the 2024 Player's Handbook has 4 subclasses that were published with it. Not every class got a new subclass. There are a couple new ones here and there, but most of the classes just had changes to existing classes. Again, the descriptions here of the class are included. You can pause to read it if you'd like. I'm just including this here because, again, the developers or the game designer said that they wanted to make the subclasses feel more like that subclass and maybe kind of bring some things into balance. But let's go ahead and get started and see what we're working with. So we are starting here with the warrior of mercy. We're starting at level 3 here with the hand of harm. It says, once per turn, when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike and deal damage, you can expend 1 focus point to deal necrotic damage equal to 1 roll of your martial arts die plus your wisdom modifier. The only real change here is that it triggers on dealing damage and not on hit. So this might lead to very rare scenarios where, let's say that a monk or a creature is immune to whatever damage type the monk can deal, which could either be the bludgeoning damage of the unarmed strike or the force damage from the level 6 feature that lets you deal force damage instead of bludgeoning damage. So if you have a creature that is for some reason immune to both bludgeoning and force damage, then you wouldn't be able to trigger this because you didn't deal damage. But I would imagine that's probably never going to be the case, or maybe it'll pretty much probably never come up except for very, 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 very specific circumstances. So this feature is effectively the same. It just triggers on dealing damage with an unarmed strike. Also at level 3, we have the Hand of Healing. It says, as a magic action, you can expend 1 focus point to touch a creature and restore a number of hit points equal to a roll of your martial arts die plus your wisdom modifier. When you use Flurry of Blows, you can replace one of the unarmed strikes with the use of this feature without expending a focus point for the healing. Again, this is effectively the same feature. It is just now specifically a magic action as opposed to just a regular action. So, you know, if you are multi-classed into, the fighter, you can't use this with an action surge anymore because it requires a magic action, and the action surge action can't be a magic action. But otherwise, this is an unchanged feature. It still works just as it was before. Finally, at level 3, there's the Implements of Mercy. The monk gains proficiency in the insight and medicine skills and proficiency with an herbalism kit. Previously, you got a free mask out of it. You know, the plague doctor mask that the artwork shows that the way of mercy monk or the warrior of mercy monk has. You no longer get that. You know, it didn't mechanically do anything for you, but it was just kind of a fun little feature. But we don't get any more, so that's a little sad. Moving on to level 6, we have Physician's Touch. So in 2024, it says Hand of Harm. When you use Hand of Harm on a creature, you can also give that creature the poison condition until the end of your next turn. And then Hand of Healing, when you use Hand of Healing, you can also end one of the following conditions on the creature you heal, that being the blinded, deafened, paralyzed, poisoned, or stunned conditions. This is effectively the same. It's just a little bit easier to read. We'll have to see how how poison immunities shake out within the 2025 monster manual. If there are much less or much fewer monsters that have immunity to the poison condition, we'll see how good these poison features are. Because again, there's no saving throw on this feature. So, you know, at level 6 as a warrior of mercy monk, you can just start poisoning creatures, and I believe it gives them like disadvantage on their attacks and things like that. But we'll have to see how that works out. Hand of Healing, that's always been a pretty good one, depending on, you know, how often these kinds of conditions are going out. I don't think blinded and deafened come up that much. Paralyzed can come up with like hold person and things like that. Poisoned might be pretty common. Stunned maybe less though. And you know, once you get higher up in some levels, you might run into stun more. But let's go ahead and move on to the next feature. So at level 11, we have the Flurry of Healing and Harm. It says when you use Flurry of Blows, you can replace each of the unarmed strikes with a use of Hand of Healing without expending a focus point for the healing. In addition, when you make an unarmed strike with Flurry of Blows and deal damage, you can use Hand of Harm with that strike without expending a focus point for Hand of Harm. You can still use Hand of Harm only once per turn. You can use these benefits a total number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier, minimum of once. You regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So previously in 2014, there was no limit to the amount of times that you could use these per long rest. You know, the Hand of Harm you could still only use once per turn. So this is a very, very, very significant nerf. I think this was one of the big draws to this subclass if you were getting up to level 11. Just the ability to just constantly add that Hand of Harm onto your Flurry of Blows. But now in 2024, by the time you're level 11, you might have maybe 2 to 3 uses per long rest, depending on what your Wisdom modifier is like. At level 20, if you've maxed out your Wisdom, you could get up to 7 from the capstone, but that's still a far cry from the 2014 rules. Like, you could easily burn through 7 uses of this within, maybe a couple combats here and there or something like that. This was a big reason that you played the Warrior of Mercy class, so this is quite a significant nerf, and we're very sad to see this go. I never really got a chance to play the old Warrior of Mercy, but I know when I looked at this class, this was always the feature that really stood out to me. Finally, moving on to the Warrior of Mercy capstone for the subclass, we have Hand of Ultimate Mercy. It says, as a magic action, you can touch the corpse of a creature that died within the last 24 hours and expend 5 focus points. The creature then returns to life with a number of hit points equal to 40, 10 plus your Wisdom modifier. If the creature died with any of the following conditions, the creature revives with the conditions removed, that being blinded, deafened, paralyzed, poisoned, and stunned. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. Again, this is effectively unchanged. It does require a magic action down from a regular action. So if you're trying to do this again in combat with an action surge, you can't do that with the action surge action. It needs to be the actual action on your turn. But other than that, it's exactly the same feature. Moving on, we have the Warrior of Shadow. So we have the Shadow Arts feature at level 3. It says Darkness. You can expend 1 focus point to cast the Darkness spell without components. And again, that's without material, verbal, or somatic components. No components at all, so it can't be countered. You can see within the spell's area when you cast it with this feature. While the spell persists, you can move its area of darkness to a space within 60 feet of yourself at the start of each of your turns. Again, that's no action required. That's also pretty good. It also gives you Dark Vision. You gain Dark Vision to a range of 60 feet. If you already have Dark Vision, its range is increased by 60 feet. And lastly, you have Shadowy Figments. You know the Minor Illusion spell, and Wisdom is your spellcasting ability modifier for it. So this is 1 key point or 1 focus point cheaper than the 2014 version to cast that Darkness spell, although we do lose Pass Without a Trace or Silence. Both of those are very good spells. Pass Without a Trace, of course, is good for sneaking into places with your party. Silence is just very, very powerful against spellcasting enemies. It's almost as good as an anti-magic field because so many spells require a verbal component. Free passive Dark Vision is never bad. If you can get up to almost 120 feet, I think most classes, or most species at least, have a base 60 feet of Dark Vision if they have Dark Vision. But yeah, the loss of Pass Without Trace and Silence is kind of sad to see, but overall, this is still a very good feature. At level 6, we have Shadow Step. It says, while entirely within dim light or darkness, you can use a bonus action to teleport up to 60 feet to an unoccupied space you can also see that is in dim light or darkness. You then have advantage on the next melee attack before the end of your current turn. This is completely unchanged. It's exactly as it was in 2014. Then at level 11, we have Improved Shadow Step. So this is actually completely changed in functionality from 2014. It says when you use your Shadow Step, you can expend 1 focus point to remove the requirement that it must start and end in dim light or darkness for that use of the feature. As part of this bonus action, you can make an unarmed strike immediately after you teleport. So basically, you can teleport behind an enemy and say, nothing personal, kid, and just hit him right in the back of the head. But I think, not being able to become invisible is pretty cool. Although I think I like this a lot, and this might be because that I'm currently playing in an adventure where we're at the end of the game, and the area that we're in is basically lit up like it's Vegas or something, where it's just bright lights everywhere. And I'm playing a Gloomstalker, or at least I have levels in Gloomstalker, so I can't use the part where I can become invisible. So if I had a feature like this where I could kind of make use of that those features still. I know I would really appreciate it in those circumstances. So I think overall, this is a very positive change to allow the Warrior of Shadow Monk to continue using its Shadow Step feature, even in places where it can't, just by spending a focus point. I think that's a really good trade. Finally, at level 17, we have the capstone for Warrior of Shadow. It says, as a magic action, while entirely within dim light or darkness, you can expend 3 focus points to shroud yourself with shadows for 1 minute, or until you have the incapacitated condition, or until you end your turn within bright light. While shrouded by these shadows, you gain the following benefits. Invisibility, you have the invisible condition. Partially incorporeal, you can move through occupied spaces as if they were difficult terrain. If you end your turn in such a space, you are shunted to the last unoccupied space you were in. And finally, you have Shadow Flurry. You can use your Flurry of Blows without expending any focus points. So this is kind of an improved version of the old level 11 feature, but it's now the capstone at level 17. It's much more powerful than the old capstone because you can basically just get the old capstone by taking the Sentinel feat. Dim light or darkness isn't available everywhere, as I was just describing, but of course the Shadow Monk can create its own darkness with the level 3 feature that allows you to just cast darkness. Doing that and then also using this feature would cost you, 4 focus points total? But you do get the ability to use your Flurry of Blows for free, so if the combat is long enough, then you are able to probably make up for the loss of those focus points just by getting those free Flurry of Blows as many times as you can. I think this is very good capstone. Again, much better than the 2014 version. If you are ever getting to level 17 as a monk, I think this is kind of worth the wait. Moving on to the Warrior of the Elements. Now, the Warrior of the Elements is technically a revision of the Way of the Four Elements monk from 2014. However, it's such a fundamentally different class that I'm basically just treating it as a new subclass. It's not even worth comparing it to the old subclass, because the way that the old subclass was designed is that you didn't really get new features. You had one feature that you got at level 3, which gave you access to a bunch of different spells that you could cast using your focus points, and then different spells were just unlocked at different levels. There were no separate features as you went down. But this is basically completely changed. It's kind of a mishmash of the Way of the Dragon monk from the pre-2024 subclasses and the Way of the Elements subclass, but it's basically just a new class. I think it's better to just treat it as a functionally different class. So we start at level 3 with Elemental Attunement. This is sort of the feature that this entire class is built around. It says, at the start of your turn, you can expend 1 focus point to imbue yourself with elemental energy. The energy lasts for 10 minutes or until you have the incapacitated condition. You gain the following benefits while this feature is active. First, you have Reach. When you make an unarmed strike, your reach is 10 feet greater than normal as elemental energy extends from you. And then secondly, you get Elemental Strikes. Whenever you hit with your unarmed strike, you can cause it to deal your choice of acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage rather than its normal damage type. When you deal one of these types with it, you can also force the target to make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, you can move the target up to 10 feet toward or away from you as elemental energy swirls around from it. So I think, again, while this class is replacing the Way of the Four Elements, it's just so functionally different that it is a whole new subclass. The Reach feature is great. Again, if you are a bugbear, you can extend that reach even further with your unarmed strikes, which is great. Reach is just never bad, and the push and pull on that, on the Elemental Strikes feature, is also very good. You know that if you saw my Barbarian subclasses video, you know that I'm just generally a big fan of being able to move creatures around, and the ability to change your damage type on each hit is also very good, because it allows you to sort of test resistances and see where you can kind of get by. All right, moving on to the next feature here at level 3, you have Manipulate Elements. It says, you know the Elementalism spell. Wisdom is your spellcasting ability for it. Elementalism is a new cantrip that is kind of like an elemental-themed prestidigitation. Kind of allows you to do the sort of shape water, mold earth, kind of a combination of those kinds of utility, but it's just baked into a different cantrip now. Then at level 6, we have Elemental Burst. It says, as a magic action, you can expend 2 focus points to cause elemental energy to burst in a 20-foot radius sphere, centered on a point within 120 feet of yourself. Choose a damage type, acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. Each creature within the sphere must make a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes damage of the chosen type equal to 3 rolls of your martial arts die. On a successful save, a creature takes half as much damage. So I would call this very similar to the shatter spell in terms of the range of it and just kind of the way that it works. It is a dexterity saving throw, whereas shatter is a constitution saving throw. So it has a what I would call a better saving throw, because I think it's more common that a creature might have a lower dexterity save. I think the fact that it has a scaling base damage where, at this level, I think you have d8s for your damage. So it's 3d8 at this level, but that'll go up to 3d10 and then 3d12 at higher levels of the monk. And so obviously, I mean, this isn't the most powerful thing, but to give, marshals don't really have a lot of AoE. So to give that to one of the martial class or even the subclass is actually very good. So I think this is still a very fine feature. Moving on to level 11, we have Stride of the Elements. It says, while your elemental attunement is active, and again, elemental attunement is that level 3 feature that gives the monk reach and allows them to change the damage type of their unarmed strikes. It says, while that is active, you also have a fly speed and a swim speed equal to your speed. So again, a normal monk of this level will have a speed of 50 feet, which is just shy of being equivalent to the fly spell. So that's very good, and you'll get up there pretty soon. And the fact that this doesn't also cost a focus point is just really nice, because I think a lot of the old pre-2024 class design for monks basically made them spend focus points for every new feature that they got, even if it added on to an existing feature that it's kind of building upon. I think the Astral Arms Monk is a very good example of that, where every new astral feature that you got cost more focus points and more focus points to do, whereas this one is just like you spend the focus points to activate elemental attunement, and then you don't have to spend more focus points to gain the fly speed or the swim speed. So very good feature at level 11. Fly speed is always good. It comes on a little late maybe at level 11, but if you're going to these levels, you're going to like having the fly speed regardless. Finally, at level 17, we have the capstone. It's called Elemental Epitome. While your elemental attunement is active, and again, that's the level 3 feature, you also gain the following benefits. First, we have damage resistance. You gain resistance to one of the following damage types of your choice: acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. At the start of each of your turns, you can change this choice. You also have Destructive Stride. When you use your Step of the Wind, your speed increases by 20 feet until the end of the turn. For that duration, any creature of your choice takes damage equal to one roll of your martial arts die when you enter a space within 5 feet of it. The damage type is your choice of acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. A creature can take this damage only once per turn. Finally, you have Empowered Strikes. Once on each of your turns, you can deal extra damage to a target equal to one roll of your martial arts die when you hit it with an unarmed strike. The extra damage is the same type dealt by that strike. So first, about the damage resistance, I think the fact that you can choose what your damage resistance is instead of it being tied to the element that you deal the damage with your strikes is very good. And it makes sense because you can change the damage on each of your strikes, so this wouldn't be tied to it in that way, which a lot of features do work that way, so I'm glad that they kind of decoupled it in this situation. And you can also just change it at the start of each of your turns. So if you realize that you chose the wrong damage resistance for the combat that you're in, then you can just change it to the more relevant one, which is great. The Destructive Stride reminds me a lot of the Ashardalon Stride spell, which was one of the spells released in the Dragons book. I can't remember exactly what it was called, Fizban's Treasury of Dragons or something like that. It's very, very similar. You have increased speed, and then whenever you go near a target or near an enemy, you can cause them to take damage. So that's just great, and it just kind of pairs very well with the ability to, grapple your allies with their emanations and whip them around the battlefield and deal a bunch more damage. For Empowered Strikes, again, extra d12 once per turn is just never bad. And again, none of this costs any extra focus points than you were already spending. So again, they kind of maybe learned their lesson, we hopes, from piling on more focus point spending on these some class features. So just overall a very, very good capstone. I'm very much a fan of this one. Moving on to the Warrior of the Open Hand. So this was one of the ones that was published in the 2014 Player's Handbook. This is sort of the quintessential martial arts version of the monk. At level 3, you have the Open Hand technique. Whenever you hit with a creature with an attack granted by your flurry of blows, you can impose one of the following effects on that target. You have Addle. The target can't make opportunity attacks until the start of its next turn. Push. The target must succeed a strength saving throw or be pushed up to 15 feet away from you. And then Topple. The target must succeed a dexterity saving throw or have the prone condition. The only one thing to point out here is that Addle no longer has the function of causing the creature to not be able to take reactions anymore. And again, that's because a lot of legendary creatures don't have legendary actions anymore. They have legendary reactions, where they can have multiple things that they can do as a reaction on during each round of combat. So now this is just that they can't make opportunity attacks. So a monk cannot lock a legendary creature out of their legendary reaction. So that's kind of why they made that wording change. Then at level 6, we have Wholeness of Body. It says, as a bonus action, you can roll your martial arts die. You regain a number of hit points equal to the number rolled plus your wisdom modifier, a minimum of 1 hit point. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, a minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So this is now a bonus action down from an action, which is nice to see, similar to the, the second wind of the fighter. This is usable a number of times per long rest equal to your wisdom modifier, down from once per long rest, so you can just use it more often. So it's easier to use, it's usable more often. Even if it only starts a few times per long rest, it's not using the monk's hit dice or any other resource. So, and the fact that it scales as you level up with your martial arts die, that's even better. So not a bad level 6 feature at all. Moving on to level 11, we have Fleet Step. When you take a bonus action other than Step of the Wind, you can also use Step of the Wind immediately after that bonus action. This is very different from the old feature that basically gave you the Sanctuary spell every time you woke up after a long rest until you did something that would end the Sanctuary spell. So this is just generally much more useful. The bonus action you take also doesn't need to be a monk-specific bonus action. So if you have other bonus actions from a multi-class or just an item that gives you a particular bonus action, that all works with this feature, so that's good to see. And again, Step of the Wind is very good. I don't know that, I assume that you can still spend the focus point on that Step of the Wind that you get sort of quote-unquote for free to activate the sort of empowered part of the Step of the Wind as well. So overall, just, being able to take more actions as part of one action is always good. So, this is a nice level 11 feature here. And then finally, the level 17 capstone, we have Quivering Palm. This has changed quite a bit. It's basically just nerfed a little bit. It says when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike, you can expend 4 focus points to start these imperceptible vibrations, which last for a number of days equal to your monk level. The vibrations are harmless unless you take an action to end them. Alternatively, when you take the attack action on your turn, you can forego one of the attacks to end the vibrations. To end them, you and the target must be on the same plane of existence. When you end them, the target must make a Constitution saving throw, taking 10d12 force damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a successful one. You can only have one creature under the effect of this feature at a time. You can end the vibrations harmlessly, no action required. So the first thing here is that the focus point cost was increased to 4 focus points, down from 3. You can now end the vibrations in place of taking one attack during the attack action instead of only as an action. So it says when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike, so you could possibly, you hit them as your first attack, and then you can immediately just cause them to erupt. It no longer drops the creature to 0 hit points on a fail, but instead they take 10d12 force damage, this down from 10d10 necrotic damage if they succeeded on the save, and they also just take half damage on a success. So, not dropping them to 0 is, technically a nerf. I don't think it's worth calling it a nerf. It's just more balanced this way because, if you just suddenly drop something to 0, if they just happen to fail the save, that's not necessarily the most rewarding thing. This is still a lot of damage that you can just force on a creature. And, at level 17, you have quite a number of focus points to work with. So if you just wanted to Nova on a creature, you technically could and do quite a bit of damage because they're taking damage regardless of whether or not they make that saving throw. So this is perfectly fine. I'm not too sad about this one. Dropping things to 0 all of a sudden is kind of fun in the moment, but maybe in retrospect, you're like, maybe, it would have been more fun to actually play out that combat. So overall, fine feature. I'm not too upset with it. All right, looking at the overview here, we're going to look at what I think is the most improved class. I think that has to go to the Warrior of the Elements. And again, I'm just kind of going off of this and that it's technically a rework of the Way of the 4 Elements monk. And this is just so much easier to use, so much more intuitive, so much more fitting in line with everything else that the monk class is doing. That's just a very, very fun class, just the way that it's built out. Going for the most nerfed class, I'll have to give that to the Warrior of Mercy. The limits on that level 11 feature are just so much more imposing than they were in 2014, where it didn't have any limits besides just once a turn. So that feels really bad to me. It just makes me less excited about this subclass now. So I just had to give that to be the most nerfed. It's still a very fine subclass, but they definitely brought the power down after level 11 pretty greatly. And then finally, for the most hyped subclass, and again, I'm not trying to double up because I would say the Way of Elements monk, or the Warrior of the Elements monk, is a pretty hyped subclass as well. But I'm also going to give this to the Warrior of Shadow. I think they did a lot to make this class, like the fact that you can use that Shadow Step with improved Shadow Step when you're not in Dim Light or Darkness, and the new capstone is also very cool. I would be very excited to play a Warrior of Shadows monk. I've never played the Way of Shadows monk before. It was always a subclass that I thought was pretty interesting, but you know, the Warrior of Shadow is still very good, and I would be very interested in playing that one. So let me know what your favorite subclass is from the new Player's Handbook down in those comments below. Are there any features that you thought you know, that were pretty cool, or maybe did you like or not like certain changes that they made to some of these subclasses? Again, let me know down in those comments. While you're on the way down in those comments, please hit that like button. And again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet and you're watching it to the end of these videos and hearing what I'm saying now, please consider hitting that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. But we're going to move on to the next class now. I think that is the Paladin. So I hope to see you in that next video, and I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you in the next one.